Hey, Scott from MyGrowthRings.com. Here once again is in the home of my future shop. And just real quickly, if you are interested in Shopsmith tools, by all means, hit the subscribe button. If you're here specifically because of track saws, welcome, but probably don't want to subscribe. This channel is dedicated to the use of Shopsmith tools. Now, that said, I think there's a strong case to be made for anybody who has Shopsmith tools to keep an open mind to the idea of adding a track saw to your arsenal. Why would I say that? Well, when you're working with sheet goods, when you're working with 4x8 sheets of stock, typically we don't have that much room in our shops to manage, particularly a rip, where you've got 8 feet in front of the saw, 8 feet behind the saw, room for you, room for the tool, room for your spouse or friend to help you. It's very difficult to work, regardless of how large your space is, with full 4x8 sheets. I had a message from somebody this week asking, hey, Scott, how would you make cleats out of a 4x8 sheet of plywood? How would you cut those 45-degree angles out of a sheet of plywood? A track saw. That was my answer, a track saw. Now, there are ways of doing those sort of rips on your Shopsmith. We'll talk about that at another point. But let's talk about a brand new tool from Wen. I owned the 6.5-inch Wen track saw. I've had this for a while. When someone mentioned, well, gee, isn't the 7.25-inch saw better? So I purchased that. We did a little comparison here on the channel, and that saw has yet to be turned on. I just don't need it. For cutting sheet goods, the 6.5-inch blade is perfect. Now Wen has come out with, and thank you, Leo, for pointing this out to me, a cordless track saw. So I picked one of those up. We'll take a look at how it compares, and then I'm going to play with this for a while before I report back and give you a real serious review. What I will tell you is I've been reluctant to use a cordless track saw because I'm never that far from an outlet anyway. I love the full power I get from a 110 plug. And yes, you're having to fumble with the cord, but I'm fumbling with the hose anyway. So it's not that big of a deal. However, if I was working away from power, or if I wanted to get away from the stinking cord, there is something to be said for cordless. So let's take a look at this tool and see at least how it compares to these other two in the Wen line. I opened this up long enough to pull the batteries out of the charger out because I knew that it wouldn't come fully charged. They rarely do. And then I put everything back the way I received it. So you can see I have my instruction sheets. I have a little elbow for connecting my shop vac to it. And then inside, you can see that they've packaged individually the charger and the 2 batteries. Now, as soon as I opened up the charger, my heart sank. Now, one of the advantages of this saw compared to other cordless track saws is the fact that it's so dang inexpensive. Well, one of those reasons, just one, is the fact that the charger that comes with it will charge 1 battery at a time. My thought initially was, what were they thinking? And what they were thinking was, well, it's cheaper. The batteries are kind of interesting. They are each 20 volts and they're each 4 amp hours. It's a pretty big battery. I've got a number of other tools that are cordless, and as you get into the 4 amp hour batteries, they do start to get heavy. These are lithium ion batteries. So once you charge them, they will keep their charge for a long time, and they'll give you tons of power right up until the point they don't. And one of the bits of advice with most of these lithium ion, well, not even tools, how about your Tesla, is you shouldn't fully drain them. Now, I don't know if this saw has built into it what our Teslas do, which is they'll stop working before they get to the point where they're fully drained. I don't know that about this saw, so that's something we'll kind of keep an eye on. A lithium ion. Now, the first question I had, and I'm sure you have, is this a proprietary battery? I bet it is. I bet you could also 3D print yourself an adapter. Some folks have done that for their other tools. I have a 3D printer, but I don't have those skills. So I'll keep an eye out for somebody else who's going to do that. And then here's the saw itself. So first glance, I can tell there's a couple differences between this saw and the previous ones. One thing I do like is it's got the white markings on it that we had on the 7.25-inch saw. that are missing here on the 6.5-inch saw. The markings are there, but they're all black and they're just about impossible to read. So thank you, Wen, for paying attention. It also does not have that anti-kickback feature. It doesn't have an anti-kickback paw or riving knife, as you see on many of these saws. But when on these earlier versions, had a little anti-kickback device and a tag hanging on it with instructions for how to remove it. So I did remove that immediately, well, after playing with it, but I removed that from the 6.5-inch saw. Haven't bothered removing it over here, but it's not at all even present on this saw. Again, thank you, Wen. It also appears that they have changed the anti-tip device. When you put these on these tracks, and this will work on a Wen track, it'll work on a Festool track, it works on a Makita track, it works on this one that's a PowerTech, highly recommended by some folks for use with the Wen saw. With this one, we've got a knob that rotates a little pivoting, called a blade, a little tongue, that goes underneath the extrusion here on the track. This one has a little sliding feature, and that's just like the Makita. Just a heads up, when I first looked at this, I thought, dang, that looks a lot like the Makita. I had considered the Makita, and it was priced out of my range because I'm just a DIYer. I'm going to use these occasionally, but this looks very, very similar to the Makita. What else do we have? We have the adjustments for getting it tightened up properly and removing any slop on the track. That's very similar to what the previous ones are. However, these have a knob and a little lever. You adjust the lever, then you tighten the knob. This one doesn't have that. Okay, so how are they accomplishing this? Oh, check that out. They've got a little expanding part, and this is a cam that I'm turning, and that cam is moving this plastic brake closer to and further away from the extrusion. That's pretty simple and slick. Again, here is that anti-tip feature right there. Okay, cool. We have, of course, the ability to set our depth of cut, and this has a setting here that allows us to compensate for if we're going to use this with or without the track. And let's see, this is different again. What did they do here? I don't even know how. They're going to make me go to this manual if it's the last thing I do. Oh, nice. See? Okay. So what they've done is they've made this setting, they've given us two markings, and we just need to know if we're going to use it without a track to go to a different indication on the scale. That's simple. That's really simple. All right. Again, way to go, Wen. Why not? Now, one thing that they did here that is new is this goes from 0 to 45 as the previous saws have done by loosening the knobs here on the trunnions, and then we can go to 45. But we can go beyond 45. We can take this all the way to 48 degrees, and it has the ability to go to -1 degree. When we stand this upright, it goes to a stop. It locks us in at 90 degrees. But we can go -1 by shifting these two little points here, and that allows the saw to tip an additional degree. Why? I'm not entirely sure. I think perhaps it gives someone a slight little back bevel on cutting doors, but 1 degree is not much. So I'm curious if you happen to know, leave a comment why the -1 degree on the saw. And then it snaps right back and takes us back to a 90-degree cut. Sweet. All right, we have the same 3 settings here as all 3 saws, where you've got at a flip of a switch, it can make a standard through cut. Another setting is to allow us to make a score cut, just a few millimeters deep. And then the other setting is for blade changing. If we're going to change the blade on this, this will allow us to plunge that until the bolt that holds the blade in place is aligned with the opening in the side. So that makes it very easy. One thing that they changed on this was they gave us a place to store our 3mm hex wrench. On these two saws, see this one, it's right here bundled with the cord, and oh, the same thing is true of the 7¼ inch. So that's a nice feature to have that added. Let's go ahead and stick the batteries on here and see how it sounds. My gosh, I can't get over how much this looks like the Makita. This looks just like the Makita. Okay, so here on the saw, we have the ability to push up and down and change the speed setting. And why is it not coming on? Maybe we need to, okay, pull the trigger and we can adjust the speed. Here's slow speed. High speed. So you can download all of these manuals directly from the WEN website. I have the manuals on my iPad for all three of these, plus the Makita, because again, I kind of wanted to compare some of the features and some of the specifications on them. There is a charge indicator built into the battery, and with all three lights on, we have a full charge. With two lights, we're at 60%, and with one light, the battery is almost out of power and needs to be charged. So this will go from 2,000 RPM at the low end to 5,500 at the high end. Also, just in case you were wondering, the two batteries are each 20 volts, but the motor itself is 20 volts. So we're not getting 40 volts of power as I have with a number of my works tools, which combine two 20-volt batteries that take us up to a 40-volt power. Now, one question I had that's not at all clear is how much do these saws weigh? One of the issues is most of the time they're giving you a weight with or without batteries, and it's just not clear. Also, when I went to the website, it said that saw back there weighs over 12 pounds. I don't know that I believe that. So I brought out a scale. Let's weigh all of these. We'll weigh this one with and without batteries, but I'm also curious what the weight of the 6.5-inch saw is versus the 7¼ inch saw. So let's check that out. All right, so you can see we're going to start with the 6.5-inch saw. It's 11.7 pounds. Uh-oh. It's 12 pounds. It's probably going to be real close. Let's try the 7¼ inch. Also 11.7. How is that possible? Are they just basically the same saw? Let's reset this and try this again. 11.7. Okay. Turns out my scale will not weigh this with the batteries out. It's just too light. So since we use it with the batteries in, we might as well just look at that. 12.5 pounds. Let's check this out. This is certainly not an exhaustive test, but I just want to see how it feels. I've got it set right now, adjusted to the track. I don't have the little anti-tip locked in because I'm not angled. And let's just see how it goes. It'd help if I set the depth of cut properly. There's 3/4 of an inch right there. Let's try that again. So one thing I noticed right off the bat, it's cutting in a slightly different spot than my other track saw. So it just trimmed a little bit of my little rubber edge. So I guess I'll be dedicating this to that saw. Not the end of the world. Did a nice job. Very nice job, actually. Let's do that again. Now this will create a bit more dust, but let's just take a saw kerf so you guys can see the action here. So there you go. That saw is about $100 more than the roughly $100 6.5-inch corded Wen track saw. Keep in mind, neither of those include a track, so you'll be purchasing the track separately. Is this one worth $100 more to me? Not to me, but I mean, you are getting a couple batteries in there and charger, so that's roughly the correct value, I think. How about you? Is a corded or cordless your choice? We'll give this some time to play around with in the shop. I'll report back later. But for the most part, we're back to our regularly scheduled content. Make it a great day.